Hello, and welcome to part 2 of my incredibly scientific and objective ranking of Beethoven symphonies, which reveals something amazing. My favourite Beethoven symphony didn't even make my top 3. I've called this the political list for a reason. You can actually hear the 18th century turn into the 19th century across the course of Beethoven's 9 symphonies. What do I mean by that? Well, politics really convulsed Europe from the start of the 19th century, a process kick-started by the shock of the French Revolution in 1789. And that spread across Europe during the Napoleonic Wars at the start of the 19th century. Revolutionary politics is bringing about that change, threatening ancien regimes across the European continent, and Beethoven really is on the front line reporting these changes. But anyway, back to that list, and astounding news! In 4th place comes my favourite Beethoven symphony, the 9th. So how's that? Well, the main reason I've always loved the symphony is its mighty choral finale, which is one of the greatest pieces of music ever written, and that fully deserves its own video. But when you mark each movement separately like that, well look, that's what you get when trying to make meaningless ranking videos. Anyway, back to our top 3. And at number 3, rather appropriately, is Symphony number 3, the Eroica or Heroic Symphony. This was obviously a revolutionary piece when it first appeared, a huge and mighty symphony, larger, longer and louder than anything heard before. There's an extra horn, a finale with variations and a fugue, and then there's the size, the length of the piece. It's truly monumental. I think this is one of the interesting things about classical music, how long a single piece of music can keep you interested. Take an average pop song, 2, 3, 4 minutes, 5 minutes you can have, but it's starting to become a long song. Similar times with opera arias too. Church music and opera ensembles can build longer movements, 8, 9, even 10 minutes. But here, Beethoven's making movements 15 minutes long, and it's just instrumental music. A first movement that's as long as an entire classical symphony. It's amazing how he can keep his audience interested for so long. So, there are more instruments and a much bigger, larger, longer sound, but it's also using simplicity at the same time. There's something very grand and at the same time very simple and straightforward about the Eroica. That's the famous opening to the symphony, but it's just a straightforward major E flat chord, played by the whole orchestra. Simple and grand. So, let's take this main theme that comes in. It's just the 3 notes that make up the chord of E flat. That's the entire melody. So, parts of the Eroica are simple, but at the same time, it's massive and wonderfully complex. Take this modulation of keys here. The symphony is in many respects a political work, a portrait of Napoleon. Beethoven had even titled a manuscript of his work the Napoleon Symphony. That was until he heard the dramatic news from France that Napoleon, the conqueror of kings, had crowned himself Emperor of France. Abandonment of his apparent anti-monarchist values angered the rather easily angered Beethoven, who, according to legend, ripped the name from the manuscript in disgust at the news. Since then, the symphony has always been known by the more general Eroica or Heroic. It's certainly a mighty work. I mean, check out the ending. It's like you're listening and... when's it going to finish? When's it going to finish? As endings go, that was unsurpassed until, well, 3 years later, and another Beethoven symphony that just happens to be next on the list. So at number 2 comes Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. And what an ending that one has. What a symphony. Where do you start with this? The theme? The mighty theme? That theme constantly reappears, not just in the first movement, but also in the third and the fourth. And what a third movement this is. What a transformation from that Haydn minuet trio. This Beethoven third scherzo movement has become a totally different and dramatic soundscape. A character from Ian Forster's novel Howard's End hears this section in a concert and imagines evil goblins traipsing around. And then you hear that same section again in the fourth movement. Beethoven is transforming the idea of what a symphony actually is. It's no longer just four separate movements, but a single concept with a unity of thought and purpose. Just look how he links movements together, like between the third and fourth movement. It's like the piece is becoming a single whole, like it's telling us something. And it is. Beethoven's Fifth tells us a story. I mean, this is about history. It's 1805. Napoleon's armies have been spreading havoc across Europe. His artillery have even fired on Vienna, Beethoven's hometown, forcing Beethoven in his home to shelter in a basement, frantically trying to block his ears out from the noise that might be damaging the last vestiges of his failing hearing. This was the hand of history, or fate, knocking, rapping, banging at Beethoven's door. And yet, Beethoven pulls a positive end out of the struggle, for us, sending us on a harmonic journey from the C minor of the start to a positive C major of its conclusion. It's a classic Beethoven story, struggling and overcoming adversity. So, finally at number 1 comes Beethoven's Seventh Symphony. And really we can keep the line of history going here, because by the time Beethoven writes his Seventh Symphony, Napoleon has been defeated, but Europe needs to be brought together. It needs unifying, it needs peace, it needs building, and you feel that right at the start of the symphony. Those big orchestral stomps through major scales. This is about the re-establishing of order. After Napoleon's defeat, the European powers gathered at Beethoven's hometown in 1814 to reorganise Europe, an event known as the Congress of Vienna, which you could argue maintained a general peace across Europe until the First World War exploded a century later. Anyway, Beethoven wrote music for this Congress of Vienna, and he also premiered this symphony, along with his Wellington Symphony, at a charity concert for wounded soldiers. It's a sweeping symphony, the Seventh, throughout all four movements, and it has this unity of purpose to it. Whereas the Fifth is a probing symphony full of doubt and darkness, the Seventh feels confident, filled with the energy of purpose. And that overall quality is reflected in the marks I've given, I think. A superb first movement, and then I have to say, a first on this list, a top marked slow movement. Beethoven has really delivered a corker with this slow movement. When this piece was first played, people always wanted this part on chord. In fact, when they used to perform Beethoven's Eighth, they would sometimes substitute this slow movement in the Eighth, just to hear it again. Anyhow, there's a power and a dynamism that drives this symphony, and that's especially true in its fourth movement. There's such a vibrance and energy on display, but even so, there's still struggle here. It's that classic Beethoven story, the one you'd print on his gravestone. The struggle through something, striving to reach some kind of new understanding. That's classic Beethoven. If you're new to Beethoven, I'd really recommend this symphony. And also the Sixth, and the Fifth, and of course the Ninth.
And the Third.
The simple fact is, there's always been 5 Beethoven symphonies that have at various times been my favourite Beethoven symphony. And I think that underlines the ultimate uselessness of trying to rank things you really like. But having said that, I found this whole process rather enlightening, and I hope you at least enjoyed it too. Thank you.